Tonight we are doing AI tools that are useful in post-production. So kind of like a little bit from all over. And then we're hoping you guys brought some ideas or things that you've tried as well. Nico is leading tonight. So these are kind of like tools that he's played with before. And it's kind of like going to be a casual kind of going through these slides, but if you've have other things you want to contribute to the conversation, please jump right in, raise your hand, or whatever you want to do, and we will talk about your thing too. So Nico, please take it away.
Yeah, hello. I'm Nico. Like Shane said, basically the less I am talking, the better. If you guys have any experience with any AI tools or anything in that realm, I would love to hear about your experiences. Because while I've used a lot of these tools, a lot of them are still new to me because I don't really have uh, great use cases for all of them all the time. You know, they're kind of like a strange tool that you would have in your toolbox, and the situations that arise for them are very rare. But here I can start sharing this. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Sweet. Sounds good. All right. So like Shayna and I said, we're doing some AI in post-production. So to start off, we have what is AI for VFX? So by definition, AI or artificial intelligence is the ability of a digital computer or robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. And I know this is really wordy up front here, but the key here I want to get to in the middle is this ability to reason. Just because this, I think, is the key for a lot of post-production visual effects artists, compositors. You're spending a lot of time reasoning and making subjective decisions that total up. So being able to eliminate that will automatically speed up a lot of the really tedious tasks that we do as artists. So in the world of entertainment, this means reducing that time and usually leaning on math-based algorithms or references of data sets that give you, desirable results based on real-world examples. So yeah. So with that, there's a couple disclaimers. So we have some security risks, especially when you have data pools of large collections of, artwork out there where it's pooling from copyright and legal issues. So you have a lot of things to watch out for in that realm. Also, when you're uploading these things, is your work being fed back into the system or is it self-contained? Is it going to a cloud or is it an app that you're running on your machine locally? Those are all kind of different facets that AI has been shown up in. And the key is that we're really not creating a source with AI. We're rather just modifying our source that we're working with. And that's kind of for me, how I've been distinguishing post-production AI versus just like general AI for creating imagery or videos or whatever. And then I have this little equation I came up with where the AI impact is the efficiency gained of the tool versus the risk of jobs eliminated or the risk of shortcuts taken in the creative process. So does that make sense? Any questions? I feel like there was a lot of information talking. I think we're good. Cool. So along with all these risks, I would claim that there are subjectively a good and bad AI tools out there. So for starters, we have bad AI, which are tools that automate a large portion of the creative process, usually aimed at beginners and amateurs, or a lot of what I see is like the mobile apps or filters, from Snapchat and stuff that tries to take a lot of these processes of tracking a face, rotoing, creating a clean play, cleaning all these things, and wraps into one, which really minimizes the artistic contribution that a lot of people have in professional workflows. So in addition to that, the cons of AI, you're homogenizing the art and losing originality. There's a lot of ethical concerns where you're taking people's work and ripping off of it just to kind of make something quote unquote new. And then you're also leading to artistic unemployment and displacement by leading these tools to cut people out of the process. So on the flip side, we have good AI, which on the contrary are empowering artists' efficiency to manipulate video and images, as well as expanding, what you can do. So that's kind of where I have really gotten interested in it because I feel like as I am practicing all the time with the fundamentals. I always want to see what else can be done with it, or what's the next evolution of that. And for me, it's that's where AI is really manifesting in the best way. I'm getting the most out of it. And along with that is obviously automating previously tedious tasks like Roto or keying or any of those things. It leads to creative inspiration. It leads to more people having access, and it's just leads to more efficiency as an artist. So here's kind of the general breakdown of the topics that I kind of feel like I have seen and played with a lot in our realm. So I can kind of go deeper into all of these as we're going here. But if anyone has any experience in them as we're going, please, by all means. So for starters, upscaling and upraising is a popular one that I saw pop up probably like a year ago, where by definition, you're just taking a source, usually of a lower quality, and increasing the scale, applying a deblur, a deinterlace, and otherwise refining the image while preserving what was there originally, to produce a result that was not originally there. So to do what something like Topaz Gigapixel does, which is the app in the lower right here, we basically would have to do a bunch of different passes and compositing to try and restore, the skin, the eyes, the features, the details, versus these are all-in-one kind of experiences that try to wrap it all up with a button or a couple sliders and tweaks, just because that is what the algorithms are trained to do, and it's very efficient at doing that. So. Yeah, there's a couple examples of going up like that. And another one is video editing, where you're having a tool that is automating the laying of tracks, automating the order of things, detecting dead air, and grabbing your clips for you. So one that I found was called Autopod, and it has a couple claims here that I put where, it's automatically editing for videos, podcasts, and shows. And I feel like this is probably the furthest I've seen AI video editing come, where it kind of can do the things that are easily identifiable or something that we would consider a little bit more simple. But for more advanced stuff, it can't really do it yet. So for now, this is kind of where we're at, but I could see in the future having something like script assisted editing, where, you can somehow feed your script or action logs and being able to give it a scene and using, both as input, being able to derive an updated to the edit. So this is kind of where that's coming from and is right now. Also, we're kind of seeing one thing, and the asterisk is we're not really sure if this is AI. We don't think it is. But in DaVinci Resolve, there's a boring detector, which is basically just monitoring how long the image is staying the same, and if it's getting like boring or dull as a audience member, which you could kind of see going both ways, as it's being helpful just for preventing monotony, but at the same time, it's also not taking into account context or what else is going on. So with any of these AI tools, there's always a lot of reason to be skeptical of what they're doing.
Yeah, Sam and I were talking about this earlier, that we saw this as a new feature like a few versions ago. And it literally is like Z's, like I'm falling asleep kind of thing. But it's just
it is
numbers.
literally just, you can set like a minimum clip duration, and anything longer than that, it will just automatically tag with this clip is boring, this clip is boring, just based on duration. So it's not anything AI
Creative.
or smart at all. It's just, it honestly seemed, when it came out, I thought it was like an April Fool's joke, but it's still in
It's
there.
still there.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I've never seen that or even run into it, but I mean, if you're making some sort of like quick cutting short form content, maybe it's useful to just have as like a guide to remind you, hey, like you're way over the limit, almost like for audio peaking or something. But outside of that, I feel like it would just be a distraction, or maybe question things that don't need to be questioned.
That kind of brought up algorithmically produced or curated content where essentially a user's like viewing habits or ways in which they interact with the media influences the media they're served next. that concept, you could see it working its way somehow into the creative process and in production software like this. That could be interesting. Real time, like algorithmically produced content where the script is changing as people are engaged or not. Kind of terrifying.
Yeah, that's kind of like that Seinfeld thing, right? There was like that AI generated Seinfeld. Yeah. The
Yeah.
other one that's crazy is this is totally random. It's a YouTuber. I think it's like Quebblecop's his name or something, where everything, all of his videos now are entirely AI, like an AI version of himself written by an ChatGPT. So like the entire character now is just an AI entity. That, I mean, if you can somehow automate this using Python or whatever, you can literally just, create a persona and fake up everything, which is crazy.
What was that name?
I think it's Quebblecop. Let me try and Quebble. Oh geez, Quebble. Yeah, this guy, Quebblecop.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, like, and he just released the recent video, like his AI. They just trained a new model, so it's like at version 2.0. This video, I think.
11 years ago, I started my
Where basically the entire thing is AI, so it's like a whole, prestige on you. But yeah, so that's kind of where video editing is, but I feel like it's pretty primitive right now. I think in the future we're going to start to see a lot of it refine, where it kind of can automate the podcast like instantly, where there's still a little bit of user input right now where you have to go through and kind of correct, especially when it's like important moments that you want to be on your, interviewee instead of on the host. You kind of have to still guide it. But moving on. We have AI photo editing and generation. So that is, all the Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, OpenAI, which I'm sure many people have used and seen, which is pretty powerful. And I think some of my favorite ways I've seen is obviously the Photoshop, text prompt to update, as well as using, or the potential for using it to generate textures for 3D work. So something like Dream Textures, which is a plugin or add-on for Blender. Which you can usually just enter a command, generate a seamless texture, and then work with it like that. So I think that's a useful tool that isn't necessarily taking away too much of it, but you should always have a understanding of the fundamentals that go behind, texturing UVs and everything like that. So this is Dream Texture. You can kind of just give it any sort of prompt for this, and it'll give you what you're looking for. It's an interesting little thing. So another one is frame rate interpolation, which is pretty fun, but it's pretty rudimentary as well, where you have these usually like GitHub repository apps or Patreon funded things that will take a source and generate in between frames. So taking, a 30 FPS source and converting it to a 60, 120, 180, and a couple different integers of that. And it usually can create some pretty interesting results, especially if it's like action or high movement. But it also all depends on the source and the power of your computer. So a free and pretty fun one is flow frames that I've messed with a lot, where you can kind of just feed it clips. And I wanted to jump to this real quick. Hopefully, I don't know what the frame rate's gonna be like here, but you can kind of see before and afters. I know it's really powerful for, I don't want to just say animation, but cartoons or any sort of animated figure really exceeds, working in 2s or 4s, you can then get more out of it. As well as there's a lot of documentation for what the algorithms used to create this. And the other thing with these are a lot of, when someone comes up with a new algorithm, it's kind of the fundamental thing that another one will start from. So this model has been applied and taken elsewhere. But for something like this, I find it really exciting because you have the potential for shooting, 120 FPS and getting away with something that looks 240 or 500, 1,000. Really trying to get away with some professional grade slow motion capture, high frame rate capture, on consumer devices. And I feel like that's it feels almost like a similar workaround to what like DLSS is on Nvidia GPUs for gaming. When it's duping frames to kind of create a smoother refresh rate kind of experience. So these are kind of the manual tools that exist out there, but a huge asterisk is that it's NVIDIA only. So there's a huge barrier of entry if you don't have that kind of equipment. Another big area is denoising.
Nico, I got a
Oh,
question.
sorry. Yeah, I'm not looking across my widescreen. What's up?
So in terms of these applications for like denoising and upscaling, from what I understand where they currently are, or at least where they were last time I checked, it's changing so frequently. So for like interpolation, like I've seen the final product of interpolation, like something from like an old anime that they're restoring to 60 frames per second or something like that. And it leaves some artifacts and just some issues of in between frames and stuff like that. For your research, is that just like so quickly like improving and changing where soon it won't be an issue, or what are we looking at with that?
I think artifacts will always be an issue, especially when you're dealing with making something that doesn't exist from, source that doesn't have it. A lot of the time in my experience when I've worked with like fluid morphs or warping two shots together, like in Flame when we would take two takes, and you're creating jump cuts, but a little bit more guided. You're using a more advanced system that is basically just doing the same kind of thing that these are, and then going back through and cleaning up the artifacts. So you probably will never get away from it, but I would say the better way to approach it would just be to reassess what you're doing. So like what we were doing at the time to create those crazy artifacts was jumping like 20 frames or something. There were huge jumps in time versus if you're just jumping a couple frames, you can get away with that really easily. So if you're smart with how you use it and don't try to get away with anything crazy, you can use rudimentary tools like this, and then just do minimal cleanup to fix the issues related to it.
That makes sense. Because yeah, it's like most of the videos you see on YouTube are just like, I guess they're pretty amateur, just like they kind of slapped it on and it looks awful. But that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's another interpolating is coming up a lot more now as a gimmick because it looks like slow motion or it looks like you're just doing something else to the image. So like filters like Snapchat and Instagram, I feel like grab onto it because it's something different, but the results are when you need them. I think that's when this will fall apart. So like if this was, I'll go back to it because the note I have here is that it's not production ready just because, if you're feeding, 4K plates into these tools, one, it's going to take forever to run unless you have like a pretty professional farm of several GPUs or a GPU farm to handle it. But also you're going to run into tons of weird artifacts that are just irreparable. It's too much. So for instance, like I used to take some like MMA and like UFC moments and I would feed them in, maybe like a 10-second clip and get out, a large set of data out. And the fence behind and in front of the camera sometimes created these like patchy circles because the gridding of I guess it probably relates to like the debayering and the demosaicing of the image. But that is a huge problem point for it right now. So that was like something I was bummed to see. But I've only ever used the free version of Flow Frames. There is like a Patreon upgraded version that technically is way better, but it seems like development stopped on this one. So it's kind of just a matter of seeing a new one come out or if there's an update.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
And Jacob too.
Yeah, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm curious. I know a little bit about GPUs and their advantageousness in certain areas over CPUs. I'm curious what it is specifically about GPUs that makes them these kind of machines for doing AI and other kind of machine learning stuff. Is it because I've heard they're very good at like linear algebra. I'm curious if you know anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it has to do with just the capabilities and power of the chipset. So based on what I know about building PCs, your CPU is handling all of the brain load, but a GPU is like an entire other computer dedicated just to the graphics power. So I feel like it's just a matter of we don't think of how much a graphics card is capable, or a general CPU. So when you take away all the burden of running a operating system and all the other things that a computer's doing, it really frees up what it can do. So a graphics card goes a lot further than just a general CPU in my experience, but I'm sure that there's way better explanations for why that is. There you go. Brad Luter said many parallel processes on a GPU.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard, like, I've heard that as well. And the rendering and stuff is moving towards GPUs.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, it just, I've heard a lot about linear algebra. It's very good at linear algebra. That's my understanding.
I mean, that goes even deeper than I know, but that sounds fascinating, and I wish I knew more about it. But I know for sure when I'm in Blender and I'm rendering with a CPU versus GPU, it's night and day. But it's yeah, GPU rendering is pretty. That was a whole change that happened, I think, to I'm sure there's a proper term for it. When you have like a separate rendering system for like a 3D rendering workflow, you know, when you're using like Mantra or Redshift or Octane rather than the base, you know, renderer. Once the GPU craze kind of hit those markets, it seemed like it took over. Like Octane, I know is just a GPU renderer, but it's so much faster and yeah, way better.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think it's all right. Cool. I'll keep going. So denoising, obviously there's a bunch of different tools out there. The main ones I'll just go over actually. Maybe if anyone has any experience with Lightroom's denoiser. I personally haven't used it that much. Just used the Photoshop one for cleaning up some basic noise, but apparently Lightroom's is actually like banging compared to even like Neat Video or Topaz Gigapixel, which has now formally been renamed to Photo AI. But
I can speak a little bit to Lightrooms. I've
please.
used Topaz's and Lightrooms, and I was more impressed by Lightrooms than I was by Topaz's actually. Topaz's felt a little bit sort of heavy-handed and gave some weird artifacting. But Lightroom, you know, it's kind of just a slider where you're basically just saying I want more or less, and there isn't really that much room for any sort of, you know, how much you wanted to deal with like color noise versus just straight luminance noise. But it generally does give pretty good results. So I have used it a few times and it's pretty effective, but I haven't tried it on anything that's, you know, anything on like crazy high ISOs or anything like that. So I'm not sure how good it can be at like totally saving a ruined shot, but at least for removing normal amounts of noise, it does a pretty good job. And it's a pretty good AI feature that Adobe has brought to you know, a huge consumer product.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the actually, so after this I have just some examples of the results, and this was just a Reddit post that people posted and were talking about it in the VFX subreddit. And it seems like a great combination. Just using some context clues here would be to rely. So Topaz Gigapixel, while it is not as good at denoising, it is fantastic at upscaling. So taking a 720p source and turning it into a 1440p or whatever, you know, 2, 4, 5, whatever X, sizing up something while preserving the source. So I think using a combination of that plus Lightroom actually would give you a pretty decent result. You know, that's just how I think we should think of AI tools, you know, in an artistic sense. Here's an example of some highlights that are restored, and you can kind of see it really loses some of it. But this was really impressive for me compared to some of the other tools out there. But Eric commented about Neat Video, which is fantastic for video and probably still the industry standard for just quickly cleaning up something, especially if it's a plugin within a major DCC app. So if you ever have a chance to use that one, it's pretty fantastic because you get red, green, and blue and channel control, as well as you're creating what they call like a profile. You're profiling the grain or the noise, and then working off that. So it's always better. And here's an example of the uprising that I was talking about. You know, so the interface, if it's not clear, you just kind of get these sliders. You could basically disable one or all of the features that are not needed. So in this case, maybe I would just do the blur and turn off the noise and just do the increasing the scale, which usually would work pretty well. And the reason why this is also great is because they have the proprietary algorithms that they're always kind of upgrading and changing, and my dislike about it is that they really try to consumerize it and make it, like, is your video very compressed, low res, HQ, it's kind of trying to group everything into it rather than making it a little bit more technical. But maybe that's just the artist in me. But all right, so motion tracking, this is a little bit more nitty gritty. But in general, anyone that's tracked something knows, it's a single, double, or triple points. Just putting points and tracking them over time. Some ways that AI is coming to this is allowing for faster tracking, better interpolation, what I would call, managing your tracks differently, being able to work with it while maintaining position and context and all those kind of things. So an example of that is with Lockdown and Mocha and GeoTracker, which are a couple tools that have existed for a long time, but were not always AI assisted and now have some AI features within them. So has anyone used Lockdown or Mocha's AI or GeoTracker? Super obscure / expensive plugins. So Lockdown, for starters, is pretty neat. It's a warping surface tracker, so you can do all kinds of crazy mesh tracking as well as planar and 2D and 3D. But the newest thing with the recent update is that you can actually convert your 2D tracks to 3D using like an AI depth algorithm that they developed. So this will be a quick little overview of that.
Introducing Lockdown 3, a new tool for tracking warping surfaces in 3D. These shots were tracked in After Effects and exported to Cinema 4D, where objects were attached. Lockdown was originally created to track 2D warping surfaces like you see here. Our new features allow you to turn 2D tracks into 3D tracks with minimal effort. But this is a lot to take in, so let's start from the beginning. How do you use Lockdown? Track a mesh in 2 dimensions. Lockdown will stabilize the video for you in a separate composition. Place your texture graphics in the composition to see them apply back to your footage. It's so easy to composite with Lockdown because it feels like you're photoshopping one single frame, which then applies back to the rest of the video.
So that is basically the core concept right there, where you're tracking something and then you get a stabilized version that you can interact with, which is revolutionary within itself. But with their AI integration, they now have a bit more going on where you can kind of take just a traditional 2D track,
push this mesh out into 3D,
and push it into 3D to create, what I otherwise would have no idea how to do in 2D. So it gives you a ton of great starting points for using actual 3D things, and there's a bunch of ways you can use that. But the idea is this is just one way AI, has expanded a previously pretty great tool into something that is pretty much on an island by itself now. On top of the fact that it integrates Cinema 4D and 3D with 2-dimensional work. And then I think another one is if you've seen like people do Midjourney or AI kind of art and then parenting or attaching it to something by just giving it some reference frames. So this is just some other kind of ways it's used. And yeah, Mocha has just some AI tools for how you interact with things now, and very similar. But GeoTracker is not completely AI assisted, but you get basically they're trying to bring 2D and 3D together, as similar to how Lockdown is, but with a little bit more emphasis on 3D tracking. So basically,
it's 400. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jared.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. Lockdown is $400. It is not cheap. Yeah, it's not great. So GeoTracker, just to relate also to the other AI tools like the frame interpolator, flow frames. A tool like this is you're using an input, comparing it to a source, and then the model is running on that. So I think it's all self-contained. You're not sending something to a cloud. So these are tools that you just would create like a rudimentary model of someone's head or a car or whatever, and then you're giving it some reference frames. So you'd be like, all right, so it looks good here, it looks good here, it looks good here, and then it figures out the rest. And they're now bringing this to Blender as well as After Effects. And the Blender one's for free right now too. So this one's a cool tool one as well. Okay, this was this. So another one is performance capture, motion capture, and that is sorry, there's a train. All right, so performance and motion capture. Obviously, we know Avatar and all the other fancy things that they're doing out there. But where there's a lot of new consumer-based options out there, like the Rococo suit. So traditionally, you have the big rigs, especially when you're working with intricate body parts like face, fingers, hands, extremities, all that. So now you have solutions that are, $2,500, $3,000 for an entire suit that gives you gloves, helmet, all the rigs you need to basically create your own animation at home. And it integrates really well with Blender and all the common apps that we like to use. Another tool out there is called DeepMotion, which basically claims and does create AI-based animations from images. So if you upload a video of yourself doing something and give it a model, it can then derive some sort of animation, usually with some sort of error where you have to kind of refine it. But the tools like this are super exciting because I know Rococo has their own version where you basically try to get a couple iPhones set up, all connected to their app, and then you kind of create a stage, and then once you're all set and it's working, you get that kind of playground to work with, and you get pretty good tracks because it's all linked together and whatnot from different angles. So these are neat, and they're getting more affordable, but they're again only doing one part of the process. They're just capturing part of the performance that someone's giving, versus a tool like Wonder Dynamics, which is I guess it's more than a tool, it's more of like an all-in-one operation that's trying to use technology for storytelling, by taking a clip and then just being able to do all of the parts of the post process. So rotoing, cleaning up, creating a animated rigged character, replacing that character, compositing them into it, and putting that all into one package. So that kind of, for me, where it crosses into like bad AI or something that might be trying to do too much or create too many shortcuts for something that justly takes a long time usually. But that's just my opinion. So here's a little bit more on Wonder Dynamics. I kind of just have some pros and cons listed out. One great thing I love about them is that they have started to piecemeal their tools within themselves. So they have like a rotoscoping tool, a performance capture tool, clean plate tool. So you can just upload your clip and then work with it. But right there, you're already in risk of the NDA and legal situation where you're uploading your clips to their cloud rather than having a app you can run on your own system, which I think in general is great to get away from it, to go better towards the multiple GPU option at home, because then you can build your own systems and have powerful rigs that can take advantage of these systems rather than rely on an arbitrary setup that someone else has for a system.
Nate has a comment.
Go for Nate.
Oh yeah. Can you hear me?
That's a yes.
Yes. Sorry, I muted it.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So I was just gonna say that Rococo I've been using lately for a project, and they actually have a free version where it's similar to DeepMotion that you can upload dual cam video on their website, I'm pretty sure, or they have like a studio sort of thing. And you can do it for 14 days for free. So if anybody wants to do that, definitely would recommend checking it out. And then I've been using DeepMotion for face stuff a lot, but it's not the best with faces. So I was wondering, do you have any software that's good for face tracking yet with AI?
Yeah, the only one I've seen that's actually fantastic is the Unreal Engine Live Link, the face rig.
Yeah, I've used that a little bit, but it's kind of difficult. But
it is.
Yeah,
it's very difficult. It's gimmicky. Once you have it though, like I spent a couple hours one time for a project trying to get that to work because I was trying to get basically I had a whole scene set up where like a character was zooming around a set, but he had no facial reactions, T-pose kind of thing. So I was trying to insert that, and I played with that for a while, and it's incredibly high fidelity. Like you can really get a lot of performance out of it. But like I feel like you're managing like the takes and you're doing all these kind of things in the background. So you really have to be aware of what you're doing if you're doing that. But yeah, I would say that's the only tool that I found. It's really great for that.
Gotcha. And I've also been doing a little bit of the metahuman stuff that they've been coming out with lately, and I think that
Yeah.
they're trying to do some sort of like AI integration with that. So
Yeah, for sure. MetaHuman's incredible, and that's what LiveLink connects to directly. So that was
oh
one of the
sweet. Okay. Got
yeah,
it.
yeah. When you connect up LiveLink, you more often than not, like unless you're incredibly talented at making your own model that has all of the details of MetaHumans, you would probably just use one of those because it's already pre-rigged and connected
Yeah.
to like the systems.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, highly recommend that one. Cool. So yeah, that's performance capture, and Wonder Dynamics, which again, also I think it's worth seeing the results too that it makes if you've never seen it, because the thing that stands out to me as like unacceptable is the clean plate that it claims to make for a lot of this stuff. I don't even know how to see an example here because I'm in it. I mean, the app itself, the actual thing is really weird too. It's like this web UI where you're super limited. But the idea is that you're just like, oh, AI picked an actor based on the scene, and then I'm gonna make it, and I want Sam, and I put Sam on him, and then it's gonna do some kind of crazy AI work when I press next and all that stuff. But then you got to pay, and it gets into the whole processing. So it's a cool tool, but I don't really see an outlet for it yet, quite yet. But if you, for instance, didn't want to pay or didn't want to roto something, you could give it a shot and pay for like a month trial or whatever, and see if you can get some decent roto for free rather than doing it yourself. Oh yeah, Cinema 4D has moves. Eric pointed out that's another good one. I feel like there's a lot of camera-based AI animation tools coming out right now, which is awesome. I think that's part of ties into my wish list at the end here. Also another one I'm sure everyone has used, but if you haven't, ChatGPT for everything VFX is pretty incredible. I know it's probably touchy when it comes to like writing or coming up with ideas, but I think when it comes to better understanding and interfacing with our softwares that we use to make our art, it's very important to know how valuable like ChatGPT can be for just rephrasing something, explaining something, especially when you know exactly what you need. I use it and treat it like it's someone I'm sitting next to that knows the software better than I do, and it can really take you far, especially when you're kind of lost or at a dead end. But with all of these many wonderful AI-based tools, you have a lot of the risks that we were talking about. So there's a couple of headlines I found, somewhat recent, somewhat not. I think the George R. R. Martin one's the most recent with like you have authors and creators that are noticing that their work obviously was ripped off to create these models. How is that going to end up kind of going one or the other? And actually, I didn't do enough research on the actual lawsuit from the AI companies, because I think last time I checked, they were still trying to figure out kind of, I don't know, what jurisdiction it was. But that's kind of always a ever moving thing. And then the last thing I have here is just the AI wish list, which for me are things that, I want AI to continue to grow and do more crazy capabilities like Lockdown and Mocha and GeoTracker. But at the same time, I kind of want just the more basic fundamentals to be refined. And for me, like After Effects masking could come a long way if to relate. It could be way better if you compare it to like Nuke or Flame or any of these tools that kind of or at that next level of separating, making updates from your axis and your motion versus your mask and whatnot. So any way that we could do that and not have to just like fix 150 keyframes for a mask too would be great. So those are just my kind of ideas I've come up with. But do you guys have any AI ideas for what you want, or have you seen, or anything I didn't mention, anything like that?
Something I've seen that's really cool is the Nvidia thing that it's like a video game thing where the characters can generatively respond to you without like having stock sentences. like you say something and you choose whatever you want to say, and they'll respond in a way that is completely unique to the thing you said to them and the context. So it's literally like you're having a conversation with an NPC, upgrading their NPC status a little bit. Seems like that would be really cool for the future of gaming and even like filmmaking, to have like these like NPCs that respond generatively.
Yeah, so somebody did a Skyrim mod that interfaced with Chat GPT, and it was, the demo I saw of it was pretty convincing. So I'm sure people are doing that, because that's like kind of something that's always bothered me about like RPGs, is the kind of stock responses and sometimes nonsensical response to, you know, what you want to say. Yeah, it seems like that could be an area of development.
Definitely. I haven't seen that one, but I it probably crosses a little bit into like that AI writing, you know, which we'll see how the cookie crumbles with the agreement they're working on right now. Also, there was a question or comment from Jacob on, can we ever really move away from AI scraping everything on the internet without consent? Seems like part of the equation. I agree, but the verbiage and like how the actual legal procession is happening with the big one I think is Midjourney and OpenAI and Stable Diffusion. They are basically arguing for, you know, their livelihood in the lawsuit. And if the judge sides with them, if they agree, then basically everything on the internet could be fair game, you know, if the judge agrees rather than not. So if they don't agree, then it's twofold. Then it goes the other way, where nothing is going to be safe unless it's like consented and purchased almost through copyright. So it kind of it crosses into, you know, free speech and access to information and all that. But
Also fair use, like
yeah,
it seems like a very fair use argument. Like, is it the black box that makes the thing that matters, or is it what matters is just if the end result is transformative? And I think that's
exactly.
a big precedent to set. Is it like, for me, I don't understand how you could make the argument that the black box matters, as long as the output is transformative. It seems like it'd be very hard to say that you can make a collage as long as it's transformative, but you can't use AI to essentially make some kind of like collage of inputs. But I
Yeah.
don't know, we'll see.
It's redefining like our terms of what is content, what is an idea, what is originality. You know, it really pushes us to have more definitions for all of that stuff, which is good in ways, but it's gonna be limiting and it's gonna ostracize some content from being successful, especially if, you know, AI content starts to dominate, or, you know, AI ideas or whatever. Not everything else will stick around. So what's gonna fall apart, you know? Like like reruns, you know, from the 50s and stuff. Now what are our reruns, you know, in the future once we have AI art and content. Another AI topic that I totally omitted just because I'm such a visual guy is audio. So AI audio. So a lot of there's like the voice changers and, you know, uploading a 2-minute clip of someone talking and you can create an entire, you know, voice box and just like entirely working with them. So that's another, you know, crazy way that is showing up everywhere, and you're seeing it obviously with deep fakes and everything too. But I don't know the ins and outs of that one as much, but I'm sure it's related to deep learning and these kind of data sets that we've been talking about. But yeah. Oh yeah, AI transcription. That's a big one too for making subtitles too. If you ever like did a interview content, actually it's been out for a while, but there's services as well as AI ones now that you can just upload like a 20-minute video and get a 20-minute transcript of it pretty accurately, which is great.
There's also a plugin for After Effects called Transfuse AI or something. It basically does a style transfer algorithm, but it's a plugin effect for After Effects instead of having to go between like a style transfer AI like Deep Dream or something and then After Effects. And it's available for like 20-30 bucks on the AI Scripts website. Pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, better smart Roto. Nate, has anyone used the version 3 Roto brush by chance? I've heard there's like some sort of AI integration or it's way better or something. I don't know, it's probably not that much better, but they claim. Color Lab AI, some AI. Sam, is that like it
Yeah,
grades your shot?
yeah, it's at least we tried using it a couple of times. At least what it seems to be most useful for is kind of doing a first pass of grading where uh you'll sort of be on a select, you have 10 shots in a scene or whatever, and you pick a shot and you say, hey, make everything look kind of like this. And
Yeah.
it'll kind of go through the scene and it'll balance and do kind of the basic grading for you, and then it'll kick you back out into DaVinci Resolve. So it can kind of, sort of save you a lot of the work of that first pass of going through and matching everything.
Right.
It was pretty cool. At least we tried it like a couple of years ago, maybe, and it worked mostly, but we ended up still kind of just having to go, or I still had to end up going through and making sure it was actually correct. So in the end, it didn't actually save that much time, but it it was the idea was there, and that was a couple years ago, and they've been improving. So I'm curious how the tool has evolved since then.
So
but
what was
it-
the parameters? Is it kind of like the boring detector that it's like it looks at scopes, so it looks at the level?
I'm not
that
sure. I
the
think
creature
it actually
project-
uses some kind of computer vision to like read the RGB data, probably per pixel or something like that. And one of the very cool features was that you can tell it exactly what kind of tools you want it to use to balance out the shot. So you can have it use just sort of lift gamma gain. You can have it use just the master offset. You can have it do it in printer points if that's the method that you prefer to use when balancing. So that was actually one of the cooler things, was that you could tell it how you wanted it to do it work, as opposed to just like generating like a LUT per shot and then it just throws a LUT onto every single shot, and that's kind of not very useful for a colorist. So it had a lot of tools in terms of flexibility for that, which was pretty interesting. But I think the grading itself was decent, but the big time suck, you still had to go through and actually verify that the match was good and that it was valid and you could move forward from there. But it was cool for I'm sure it has its use cases. Maybe not in our particular workflow for that show 2 years ago, but I'm sure it's found plenty of use cases besides that. And they also have a bunch of other tools in addition to the kind of the AI matching feature, where you can create looks and all other kinds of things in that tool. So it's kind of a whole suite of products. But I haven't used it in a couple of years now, so I bet it's come a ways.
Hmm. Yeah, that just reminded me of Runway ML or whatever. If you guys have heard of that one.
Too, yeah.
That's like a kind of like Wonder Studio, where it's like the all-in-one web UI, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like a NLE, like a editor, with all kinds of features and functionality. But I don't
Yeah, I
know
think it's supposed to be like a cloud, like do your whole post in the cloud sort of thing
exactly. Like,
using
give us all your
machine learning.
footage, and then you can do
Yeah.
whatever you want with it here, which is an interesting concept. It's almost like, the leaning into the AWS culture, of like, oh, we can just get a cloud system, but it's not really consumerized yet, where everyone can just like get a system or get an option to work with.
Yeah. Someday.
Yeah, someday. I would love to be able to just like rent a crazy PC, that I just like remote into from my laptop. But I don't think that's ready yet.
Yeah, then you get to upload a terabyte of footage.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Is that especially when you're dealing with frame rate interpolation or all these, we deal with source that's so big, you can't just like upload a terabyte of footage real quick and just be like,
Yeah.
oh great, now I can work with it super quick and Runway. It's just silly.
Yeah, and even if you're using this on iPhones can shoot ProRes now, so it's not like even a phone clip
Yeah.
will be tiny and easy to upload. Like, you're gonna spend time uploading ProRes 422 HQ from your phone to this AI tool in the cloud, and yeah,
Yeah, data is also the biggest limitation. Like Dane was before flow frames, Dane was like you would the first step was like convert your video clip into images, so it takes a 5 GB clip and makes it automatically like 20 GB. And then it's like, all right, I'm gonna auto compress it and do the other. So by the end, the 20 GB clip is like 100 GB of data that you just allocated, and the results like not even that good. So you just wasted all that time, the data it takes. So for things like the color one or something that's like a time suck with AI, I feel like there's such a risk now that if you're not certain what you're going to get out of it will be somewhat useful, it's almost better to avoid it. But I'm sure there's asterisk on that as well with all the cases. But yeah. Yeah, big files. Oh my gosh. Can't believe how big some of the files are. We need like faster drives and things. USB-C on iPhone. That's big.
We need the middle out compression algorithm. That's what we need.
The middle out?
Yeah, have you seen Silicon Valley?
Oh no.
That's like the big premise of the show is they create this miracle algorithm that compresses everything and it like changes the internet.
Interesting.
That's
Yeah,
what we need.
compression. That's what like a lot of these algorithms are. It's just like different ways of compressing data or uncompressing data to make something look right or better. Which is an interesting like computer science challenge, but it's not done yet. They're still getting better. Also, I think isn't there a built-in Mocha tool in After Effects? Am I crazy? I'm trying to remember right now. I know there's a pro version, but I thought there's like Mocha in AE.
Yeah, you can do
Yeah, okay,
basic
it's
I'm pretty sure
planar
it comes
stuff.
with it.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah,
But
I thought
it's
part of it
limited.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Nate was saying like the Roto tool sucks. You should be using Mocha then. Using Mocha's way better for everything related to Roto. That will be a huge jump for you.
Yeah, you can even use just the tracking data alone. Like you don't have to make the shape in Mocha, but you can take the tracking data from it and apply it to whatever roto you apply in my case, Nuke, but also After Effects or Fusion. However, you can work that around.
Yeah, jumping between systems, like when it's like, oh, just kicking out a mat or kicking out something, bringing in between, like that's a super powerful tool for all of these as well. I agree it's a little frustrating, but I honestly like the Mocha window. Same with Lockdown. They also has a pop-up window that makes very little sense at first, but you get used to it. But I feel like in general, I'm seeing a lot of different ways all these tools are being connected, as well as, before a couple years ago, the craziest tool in After Effects in my mind was something like Element 3D, where we now had the ability to take 3D assets into After Effects and manipulate them very, very, difficult and rigidly. But nowadays, you can bring a model into After Effects almost natively. But if you don't, you bring it in with Element 3D, you can now attach it to all the 3D tracking data you can get from Lockdown and GeoTracker. And it's just exciting to see how AI is connecting all these tools we have that are advanced in their own ways. But when you put them together, you start replicating almost what you do in 3D software in a 2D compositor or a standard deal NLE, DCC editor.
Yeah.
So
even Cinema 4D to a degree, you can just basically equivalently dynamic link it these days because they have that partnership.
Yeah, Cinema and After Effects go hand in hand now, which is why Lockdown, I think, like figured out a bunch of stuff because they are made with the same code at this point. But yeah, there's always a reason to use it, and always just be skeptical, and you'll get a lot out of it, I think.
Have you seen anybody seen any AI tools for like physics simulations, like water or like soft bodies and stuff like that, that's any better than just like brute forcing it in like a program like Houdini or something?
I don't know if it'd be a simulation at that point.
Yeah,
I- I don't know about AI specifically, but there are like good alternatives coming out. Like Embergen is a really cool smoke and fire tool that is starting to get a lot of heavy use. Like I think a couple artists started using it at Fuse.
It's real time too.
Mhm.
It's a really cool tool. I don't know of a tool that has anything to do with simulations like that, but I personally have been using ChatGPT just to like, I know it's super silly, but like even just being like, all right, hey, I want like a medium-sized simulation of a smoke of after a car crash or something. Like what would the parameters be for the scale of that, for instance? If you give it really specific questions, it can give you some hypothetical numbers that make sense within the real world physical scale, and then building that in Houdini or Blender or Cinema or whatever creates pretty accurate results.
that's very cool. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, because if you, I mean, obviously it's not inundated with like the latest updates with After Effects or whatever, so it's not going to know every setting. But if you correct it and say like, oh no, that setting has changed, this is different, like what would this be, or how small should my voxels be, or whatever, how long would this render take, or you can come up with any number of questions that it'll at least be able to give you a better understanding of, and then you can get a way ahead by avoiding a lot of that guesswork. 'Cause you're not just tweaking and rendering to review it. You kind of know, okay, my scale is already good. I told the AI that I wanted to be a violent fire. I want it to be something very dramatic. So then it tells me to pump up the right numbers, and then you're good to go. Yeah, Blender has flip fluids, which is a fun little plugin. It's a little janky with how you like interface because there's a lot of different options, but the results are great. I did see a little bit about the Avatar water solver in like the behind the scenes stuff. I don't remember if it was called Joker. But yeah, I'm always interested because to me those kinds of moments when like a movie comes out, a team comes out and they said like, oh, we engineered a new way to see pixels or something, it's like it feels like less of a visual effects accomplishment and more of like a computer science or like a mathematical accomplishment in the realm of like a Nobel Prize rather than something that like you or I'd be able to figure out just clicking away on our apps. So that was always really weird, but it's super powerful to see, when I don't know. Avatar 2 is crazy. That was a crazy one.
Unless anyone has anything else to share, I think we've exhausted a lot of options. But we can continue this conversation another day. But thanks, Nico, for putting that all together.
Anytime.